Patrick Lencioni wrote a book called The Ideal Team Player. And the 3 words that he puts in play are humble, hungry, and smart. And so humility is not a sign of weakness. Humility, by definition, is strength under control. Humility is that picture of that bit that's in a horse's mouth. That horse is 20x stronger than the little person on its back. But that bit, it is strength under control. That's humility. A leader doesn't advance himself or herself for their own personal advantage. It's for the people that are around them. They have a sense of humility that I know who I am. I don't need you to do something, be something. I don't have to have a title. I don't have to office over here. I have a security of who I am. That's humility.
Welcome, world. Welcome, family, to another episode of the EL2A podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Gilmore. To the right of me, we got Mr. Military Man, Mr. Miles McConaughey. How you feeling today, brother?
Feeling pretty good today.
Love it. How about yourself? To the right of him, we got the Rocket, the highest of 7 hills, Mr. Eddie Rocket. How you feeling today, brother?
Pretty good, man. I'm good today.
All right. To the right of him, we got a special man to the right of him. He's wearing a lot of hats. I call him PMC, but you may know him as Mr. Mark Cummins. How you doing today, Mr. Mark?
Outstanding. Great to be here with you guys.
Glad to have you here. So for y'all that don't know, he's a pastor. He's an Ironman. He's a dad. He's also a board member for Cut Different. That may be
and I'm also a husband, man. You got to keep in the story, bro.
I'm sorry. You're right.
Come on.
Miss Leather. He's a husband. Miss Leather. I'm sorry.
Didn't children grow up and leave you?
Yeah, right.
But my sweetie,
that's forever.
Still with me.
That's forever. I appreciate it. So one thing I'm gonna tell you this, man. You're a hard man to find. I don't know if you're hiding from somebody or what, but I did a lot of research on you. You really can't find much about you. Huh. Is that done on purpose? Why is that?
Well, you must not know of this little thing called Google. Because I guarantee you put that name in Google, you find out a whole lot of stuff.
I do, but I'm saying as far as you don't do interviews. Have you ever done no interview, no pod? I can't find anything of that sort on you.
I mean, hit or miss, but I do a little interview every single Sunday morning, 9 and 10:30, a little place called Hope.
Okay. So I do know of those, but I was talking about different. But this is special because what we're going to create here today, it's going to be something for somebody to go back to. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are wondering about the backstory. Shout out to your daughter, Miss Emily, the becoming story.
The becoming
story. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are wondering about that. And that's what I want to get here today. We're going to start there, but we're also going to travel on the story of leadership because you exemplify that. I'm going to start with the story. I'm going to give you your flowers first before we get into it. All right, so 2020. I think it was maybe Mary Gwen that maybe introduced us to us. And ever since then, you allowed me to walk into your world. All right. A young whippersnapper, not knowing much, trying to figure it out, trying to build the organization called Cut Different. You allowed me within your walls of your church. And I was able to sit and I was able to watch you. And I learned so much in that moment just watching you as far as leadership, how you manage the team. And the one of the biggest takeaways that I took away is how your team was. So that you were, inspirational. But when I start, talking to your daughters and then the other people on the team, that's how you know you got a good leader. Because are they building other leaders? Me and Emily sat in the room many a times on the whiteboard. And I know she learned that from somewhere. So, you know what I mean? So kudos to you. Your leadership is phenomenal. I took so much from you, the way you spoke, the way you did every first thing. I was watching. I don't know if you noticed. I know you think I kind of ran away from you there on the back end, but I was watching you. So kudos to that. But to get into the story, one thing you told me in that moment, and I take this and I say this to the team as well. You said, I get to. The attitude of you get to. Now that changed my life, that viewpoint, that perspective. And you said those words to me. Where did you get that from? Where did that mentality come upon you that I get to, we get to do these things attitude? Where did that come from?
Yeah, well, even back to when you said that I allowed you to come into my church, like, hello, that church don't belong to me,
yeah.
Right? My name's Mark. The church belongs to Jesus Christ, right? I get to be an under shepherd, right? It's a mindset where instead of you build up expectations. So here's the deal. Humans are at their worst when there is an expectation that goes unmet. People get royally jacked up, angry, bitter, families blow up, businesses blow up when you start with an expectation. There's a proverb that says this. It says when you're going to the banquet, it's in God's word, but I'm paraphrasing for you. When you go to the banquet, don't sit at the front of the table, because if the host comes and says, "Yo, Mark, this ain't your chair. You need to go down to the end of the table," right? That's an embarrassment piece. So you start from a point of just humility that I get to. There's not any expectation. Life doesn't owe me anything. My entire life is a gift. There's nothing that I did to step into this world, right? Every single day is a gift. And I see each day as a gift. It's an opportunity. See, success doesn't happen in a day. It happens daily. So when you lean every single day that I get to be a dad, I get to drive a car, I get to brush my teeth, I get to be a husband, it changes your approach to it compared to I have to, right? That becomes a sense of obligation. So that's really where it started. It certainly wasn't in my growing up days. I had a very rough childhood. Certainly wasn't the Marine Corps, because as Miles will tell you, there wasn't much get to. It was have to from the rising of the sun to the setting of the sun, right? They weren't interested in our opinion. It was, you had better move faster, right? But I think probably somewhere, I remember in 1990 is when I stepped into full-time ministry. And I found a guy then named John Maxwell. And he wrote a little piece about what seminary never taught you, because I had stepped in to, quote, a career as a pastor, but like everything they taught me at school wasn't a part of everyday life. And I think it was John who really began to give that mental mindset that your attitude, your approach to the day is everything.
I love it. Even going back, so you did speak about childhood a little bit. So the attitude or the mindset that we're hearing right now, and I love that you said it hasn't always been that way. You had to work up to this way. So can you take us back into the beginning, where you from, how you were raised, and and let's work up to the moment we are right now.
Yeah, I needed to cut different, big time. And, so it's so I'm a 65 baby, and formative years in the 70s. And, my dad and my mom, it was really rough. And my dad, he said those vows, but the idea of being a one-woman man, that wasn't in my dad's mindset. And then also my dad, to numb the pain, alcohol was always a part of, my home. And so things were just really, really rough. And when I was 10, they divorced. So that would have been 1975. The world has changed a lot. Women stepping into the workplace in 1970s, it was really challenging. And my mom was trying to raise me. It was me, my brother. I have a brother who's 3 years younger and a sister who's 5 years younger. And it was really challenging at the house. Money, time, energy, not having a male voice. And so, I had some athletic abilities. So I began to lean into that space, coaches, but also the whole space of women, girls, drinking. That whole space, trying to find an identity, but, never really finding it. And even that's what I think drove me to want to go to the Marine Corps. I was okay as a high school athlete, but I wasn't a D1 scholarship athlete. So there was no money to go to college. And so that's where the idea of the Marine Corps, get me out of this place, right? I knew whatever was there, and I didn't even know how to verbalize it, right? But what was inside that house, I know that's not what I wanted. And so maybe ignorantly, I jetted off towards the Marine Corps.
Oh. And so in that phase right there, so who you are now, are you out of date? Did that play affect the childhood that you grew up to? Was there a moment in your life like, I would never allow this to happen for my kids when I become a dad?
Yeah. I mean, there's multiple steps through that. One is, believe it or not, of all places, I met Jesus Christ in the Marine Corps. And so initially I was that card-carrying jarhead. Jack Daniels and I were really good friends, and women, carousing, all of that. And then in Okinawa, Japan, I met Jesus Christ, and he changed my life. So a huge part of, not huge part, like the part of who I am today is because of the residence of Jesus Christ in me. I would tell you, the natural man, in kind of just bowing up against my dad, right? Like, I'll show you, right? When the girls started coming, when I started having kids, I think the natural man was like, yeah, I'm going to do it different in spite of you. But that's not healthy, right? That's not owning your greatness. That's not moving forward. So God and the Holy Spirit really began to shape me, and I began to read about what it meant to be a dad. I'll tell you this, man, when back in the day, and they still do it today, but I didn't know Emily was going to be Emily, my daughter, right? And so when the doctor came out and said, "It's a girl," man, I didn't know what to do. Because I remembered, so I'm early in following Jesus, Eddie. And I remember some evangelists, those evangelists, they scare the hell out of you, kind of a deal, right? And he was like, "I want you men to know, whatever you sow, you reap. So whatever you did, it's going to come back on you." So all of a sudden this little girl comes out, and I'm like, because I knew who I was before I met Jesus with girls, right? And it never dawned on me that every girl, every woman is a daughter of the King, right? How we treat them, how we interact with them, what we speak into them, what we try to get from them. So I didn't know, what am I going to do? We're not talking about football, Marine Corps, and this little girl. So I remember just trying to buy every single book possible to read about what it meant to be a dad of a little girl, which is really, when you think about the space that Cut Different is leaning into, and I don't mean this in a judgmental way, I just mean it from just a pure observation. If you wanted to put a fence up, Miles, in your backyard, you got to go get a permit, right? Man, you want to have a kid tomorrow? Go get a pizza and a bottle of wine, have Friday night, boom, go to Advent, baby's here. And the most important thing a human being's ever going to do is shaping and mentoring that human being to step into a real world that's chaotic, that's confusing, that will often try to abuse them. And the role of parenting, and you think about all that we do, you were a high school athlete, a college athlete. Think about your playbook. All of the plays, all of the scenarios, right? And then you think about the parenting process. You've not leaned into it yet, but how we would prepare ourselves for a football game. How are we preparing ourselves to become parents? And so I really leaned into that. Like, I wanted to learn, what does God say? And what do experts, right? Childhood development, right? Experts, what do they have to say? And I wanted to lean in because I wanted, there's a lot of places in life that you might not win at. We aspire to be successful in our careers. We aspire to be good neighbors and husbands in so many areas. But like, to those of us that God has given the privilege of being a dad, like, understand this, mark this down. God picked you out of all the men in the world to be his dad, her dad. That's not random. That's not a visit to Walmart and walking down a shelf and saying, oh, let me see if I pick him or pick her. God picked you. God picked me. So leaning in, but that's also why cut different is so important, because we live in a broken and fallen world and not everybody is leaning in. And so you have said out loud, to where there's a gap, we'll lean in and make a difference.
Love it, man. So I think there's so much to unpack right there. Because there are so many people, kids, grown adults that are lost. And you were able to say that there was a point in your life where you found Jesus.
Yeah, man.
And in that finding of Jesus, was it just, okay, I found Jesus and I'm going down this path? Or walk me through how was that? This is like, I tapped my toe in, but it's really not for me. Testing it out. Because there's somebody struggling right now. And they hear people say that, like, yeah, Jesus saved, but it's so, yeah. But how like what happened for you for this change to start happening?
Yeah, I mean, in Okinawa, probably the biggest thing was I always saw Jesus and religion as a list of rules, sucking the fun out of life. That, God was this cosmic cop and he's just waiting for you to speed and he's going to give you a ticket kind of deal, right? And for the first time in the Marine Corps, when these guys shared Jesus with me, it was all about relationships. And man, we are hardwired for relationship. Why do you think it's so hard? When you stop playing ball and you don't have the locker room no more, you miss those relationships, right? The friendships, right? In the military, Miles, those guys that you did life with, right? I mean, relationships are so important. So I finally understood that Jesus isn't some God up in the sky who's trying to control me. He wants to do life with me. It's a relationship. So I began to lean in and to discover who he was. Now, hear me. That didn't make life any easier. I mean, Jesus says out loud, and this is where I think a lot of times pastors and churches miss the mark. Jesus says, life's jacked up. He said, life is filled with troubles and trials and sorrows, all the temptations, all the pressure points, all the injustice. None of that goes away because you pray and ask Jesus to save you. We live in a world that is countercultural to God and his word. So I think some people get broken up, get on a trail away from God because they thought, okay, there's this utopia prayer. Jesus save me. And then kind of like everything is going to kind of go just right. Or someone tells them, read your Bible, pray, and life will go better. I'm going to tell you, brother, I've read my Bible and I've prayed and life has fallen apart. I'll tell you this, straight up. There ain't anybody meaner in the world than church-going folk. And I pastor a church. It's crazy. My greatest pressure in life, my greatest obstacles in life hasn't been somebody who identifies differently, who votes differently, whose skin colors differently. It's people who would claim that they're Christians. But here's the difference. The difference is, are you trying to control the idea of Christianity so your world's how you want it to be? Or are you allowing Christ to control you and to shape you into who he wants you to be? So I started following them, and their ups and downs, twist and twirl. Man, in my world, things didn't change overnight. But let me tell you what was different. And I think this is true. So the Bible talks about this small, still voice, right? Society would say that's your subconscious, right? The Bible tells us that's the spirit. So back in the day, right, I would go to a club. I'd get out there and groove on, right? I see a little filly on the side of it. I'd be looking, making the eyeballs, right? And kind of, doing all the stuff. And, right, I'm playing Yellow Pages. Now, you guys are too young to know Yellow. There used to be in America this book called the Yellow Pages. And if you wanted to find something, you had to open the Yellow Pages. Well, they had this like jingle, let your fingers do the walking through the Yellow Pages. We used to do that in a club, right? You just let your feet, right? It was all carnal. It it was sinful. I never thought that it was wrong. Man, before I met Jesus, if she said yes, you said Shazam.
Yeah.
Right? You were selling. You were in the end zone doing the Icky Shuffle, right? Come on. Then I meet Jesus, right? So he was at the USO. Remember the USO, Miles?
Yeah.
The USO. I prayed, asked Christ to come in my life. And that was that day. I'd been going to clubs. I remember going to the club, and everything's like feeling different. Like I got this voice saying, "What are you doing looking at her like that?" I hadn't been discipled. I really didn't know. That's the Holy Spirit. Like when you invite Christ into your life, like this is not hell insurance. It's something a lot of times pastors present Jesus as hell insurance. Like you drive a car, you have to have car insurance in case you get in an accident, right? If you got a house, you have homeowners insurance in case a bad storm comes. I think a lot of times we present Jesus like hell insurance. Just in case this whole story that grandma's been talking about, dragging your butt into church, hearing about, just in case it's true, go ahead and say some sinner's prayer, because if it really is true, when you die, you don't want to go down there. That's why we got a lot of people who say that they're saved, but they live like the devil. Because when you ask Christ to save you, you are giving him you. And that's what I did. And I got this Holy Spirit, and it's like, what's going on? I'll tell you one more story about, I mean, there's so many stories, right? I mean, I made a decision for Jesus in 86. So I've got lots of stories, but I'll give you a story. When I met Linda, so I met her in a church. When I came back, I got discharged coming out of the Marine Corps, and I'd done everything with women wrong. And I got the Spirit trying to reteach me. And I remember when we went out on a date, and we're starting to like each other. And if you've seen my Linda, like she is a modern day Barbie. Like, I mean, she's just hot, right? And so, like, we're kissing and making out and stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm in the Spirit saying, "Really, dude, this is what you're going to do?" And I remember stopping, and it hadn't gone farther than just, kind of heavy kissing and stuff. And I remember saying to her, we can't. Now, I know she's looking at me, and she said, "Listen, I want that boy now." Slow down, girlfriend. Slow down, girlfriend. Right? And so do you know, from that moment, we were just dating. For the rest of the time we were dating and our entire engagement, 18 months, I never kissed her again. I never put my arm around her. I held her hand. And the first time I kissed Linda again was 18 months after that first moment, on the day that we said we do. And so, one, I will tell you, when you wait 18 months to kiss your bride, you don't have no 4 o'clock in the afternoon wedding. We had a morning wedding. You don't think I'm joking? Putting that thing in the morning. I've been waiting, son. Hey, you all stick around. You have your reception. I was out of there, and baby, we going to the honeymoon because God's given a gift. But see, the whole thing is we think in following Jesus that God's got a killjoy, where we totally don't understand who God is. And so you asked the question about following him. I'm just telling you, Jamie, following him is 10x better. It's, again, I mean, we're kind of leaning into the sex thing right now, but like, here's what's lost on a lot of people. And you probably haven't heard it in church. Like, hello, when you go to church, and whatever church you guys go to, if you sing hymns or you sing them praise songs and you lift your hands up, right? You understand you're singing to the God of the big O. You know that, right? You know God, when he was sitting down and creating Adam and Eve, like he said, you know what? I'm going to put a whole bunch of nerve endings right there. I'm with a whole bunch of nerve endings right there. And when they come together in marriage, my marriage gift to them is the big O. Orgasm. Boom. Like you think Hugh Hefner. See, that's how things are so jacked up. We think Hugh Hefner, Playboy. We think the world created that. God. How can anybody think God's a prude when God is the creator of the physical body, every nerve ending, right? And so when you begin to change your mindset, that God's not trying to hold you back. God's not trying to keep anything from you. God wants us as human beings to live best now and in heaven.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You're saying the same message to the world is changing. You pick up your phone, even if you don't want to, you're going to see a half-naked woman.
Absolutely.
You're going to see, that's just a normal thing right now in this world that we live into. Relationship girls, and it go both ways, you know. So speaking to our youth or speaking to anybody, I hear what you're saying, but in a world that this is all they're feeding us through commercials, through music, through everything, this is all we're getting. What do you want me to do?
Absolutely.
You know, like, what do you want me to do? I hear what you're saying, PMC. I heard that you waited 18 months, but that was way in 19.
Back in the day. Man, people
home. You couldn't see nobody. You didn't have to. In the world that we live in today, people have so much access to other people. Back in the day, Miss Linda, she ain't have 50 men in her DMs. You couldn't go in a girl's DMs back in that time. So yes, your wait, it was maybe easier for you back in the day. For a person in this world, that's kind of hard to do. So what are you saying to this age of people? That's saying, PMC, I hear you, but it's almost impossible for me to do that.
Well, you might have to do some editing if I talk much farther after this, but which is totally cool with me. And you can leave it in because whatever a man says, he should be willing to let it be on the front page of any newspaper. First of all, you can't control the first look. I live in Florida, and I love the beach. I love to work out. And man, you can't stop, right? Two Brown's cheeks walking by you, in the middle of the day, and it ain't nighttime and the moon's out, right? But you can be in control of the second look. God's not going to hold you responsible for that first look. Same thing when you go to the gym and they got them yoga pants out. You're right. Back in the day, like, I can tell you at the gym, like, maybe there were yoga pants, but I'm telling you, I didn't see them. I mean, you go to the airport, you go to the Walmart, you go every place today, you yoga pant everywhere, and there ain't nothing left to the imagination, right? So, baby, you got to get your game on right now. Yeah. You got to understand that if you let that thought take up a little bit of residence, the book of James says that destruction and death, it starts with that little thought, right? So you got to decide when you're going to kill the weed. When you let the weed grow, right, then it's going to take a whole lot more effort to pull it. You're going to have to hire someone to come in with some weed killer. But when that little weed begins to sprout itself, right, you can get after it. But when you let that thought kind of just sit there for a second, because you say to yourself, it's just a thought. Now what that thought does is it sits up on your chair and puts its feet up on your coffee table. And it's got a cool drink from your refrigerator. And it's holding the control channel in its hand. And now you're kind of hanging out. You become buddies. So you got to understand that you can't dabble with it. I've made some decisions now where I'm at. Like I am never anywhere. And when I say never, I mean 24/7, 365. I am nowhere ever that other people don't know where I am. from my schedule, from my wife, and I don't have my phone and my wallet, but the little air tags now, man, I got them on all kinds of stuff. People know where I'm at. So one of the strategies is this. So you're teaching us to own our greatness, right? Men need to own their weakness. And here's the part that if you need to edit it out, you edit it out. But I'm going to give you what I have given to young men in my world, and this is how I manage my life. Are you ready? Eddie, can you take this much? Miles? Stiff doesn't have a conscience. So if you think you're going to fight the battle after you're already turned on, ain't ever going to happen. You got to decide way in advance that part of my greatness is I'm not letting my little head guide me and direct me. God's given me a mind, and I can think and I can choose. And this idea that somehow we can't, how she looks and whatever, man, and I get what you're saying. You got technology today that I didn't have. Back in the day, like if you were gonna do porn, and you had to find that dad down the street who had a stack of Playboys under, right? If you were going to see like what today is porn, like videos, you had to go to the seedy part of town, right? Like that side of town, and you went in, they had like these machines. I guess I'm telling you because I might be no. We had to go in, and you'd pop the quarter in, and it would kind of show you, right? I mean, today you just pick up, this is your phone, right, Eddie? I'm going to check it, make sure you're looking at us. No, it's clean. You can see anything you want. Okay? So just because the accessibility is easier is not an excuse. We're not going to get before God one day. You're not going to get before your wife, before your daughters. Well, Dad would have held the line more if I was born back in the 1920s, 1940s, 50s. I understand this. It's 2024. Someone will do a podcast in 2044, and they'll ask you the same question. You'll be older like me, and they'll be like, hey, Jimmy, you kept purity back in 24, but man, it's 44. You push something on your watch, and boom, girl just pops right up to you, right? I mean, it's all kind of great. It's the same temptations that were in the garden are here today. And in the garden, God said, enjoy everything, but not that tree. Not that tree. And so then Satan came, right? And he said, hey, Eve, did God really say that? She initially said, yeah, God did. But then a little pressure was put on, right? And so then she's kind of thinking about it. She's looking at it. She's kind of thinking, all that kind of stuff, right? And then, of course, right, she does the deed. And literally all the hell, the hurt, the pain, the sorrow, the injustices, all the sin that we see in the world is from that moment. Imagine, rewind. That temptation's coming on. Come on, Eve, you can eat. Man, you can eat from this tree. God knows the moment that you eat from it, you're going to know, like, Kim, it's going to be okay. Imagine if the whole story, she's like, okay, so what you're telling me is it's okay. God didn't mean what he really meant. That's right. He didn't mean what he really meant. Oh, okay. Imagine if her next step would have been, and God, come here. Got a question for you. He's saying that you didn't really mean. So one of the ways I taught my daughters when they're in high school, I said, some boy's going to be looking at you, talking to you sweet, and all kind of stuff, and saying, hey, listen, if you really liked me, if you really loved me, all that kind of stuff. I said, here's how you handle it. So what you're really saying, if I really loved you, it's okay, you can get in my panties and everything be just fine, right? Yeah, come on, baby, I love you, right? Here's what you do. Hey, Dad! Yeah. And I can walk in beast mode. Yeah. Right? The temptation is the same. And so is our God. I mean, I'm following the God of the resurrection. So you're trying to tell me that the God of the resurrection, which means he who was dead became alive again. You telling me the God of the resurrection, the strength and the power that called Jesus back to life, you tell me the God of the resurrection can't give me control over? No. That is, following Jesus, man, is life-giving. And all the tools are in play. And as you've taught us so well about owning your greatness, God gives us this gift of free will, and you can own that greatness. And you can go to God, then you go to your other buddies. You say, listen, hold me accountable. Let's be the kind of men that go to our honeymoon night as virgins. Let's be the kind of men that honor our wives. Let's be the kind of men that don't just kind of give this thing lip service. So I know that's a lot of talk, a lot of real life stuff, but
I'll let you go because you're PMC, and I wouldn't expect you to go any other way with that. But one thing that's come to my mind, so your background, so you got the Marine Corps. Now you're being a pastor, in between your Ironman, all these different things that's making you the man who you are today to be able to have this mindset that you have. And again, the word is leadership. When I text you, I was talking about leadership. I want to know the idea of you. So in the world of Madden, when you used to play Madden, you can create players and make players whatever you wanted to put them in, make them how fast, how big. When you're thinking about a leader, if you had to give 3 skills, 3 qualities to a leader, what 3 qualities would you think makes the perfect leader or the best leader?
well, it's not. I mean, there are many words, but you're asking for 3, and it's not necessarily original with me. Patrick Lencioni wrote a book called The Ideal Team Player, and the 3 words that he puts in play are humble, hungry, and smart. And so humility is not a sign of weakness. Humility, by definition, is strength under control. Humility is that picture of that bit that's in a horse's mouth. That horse is 20x stronger than the little person on its back. But that bit, it is strength under control. That's humility. A leader doesn't advance himself or herself for their own personal advantage. It's for the people that are around them. They have a sense of humility that I know who I am. I don't need you to do something, be something. I don't have to have a title. I don't have to office over here. I have a security of who I am. That's humility. Second would be the word hungry. That's initiative, that you want to grow. You are leaning in every single day. You want to learn something. You want to grow. You want to understand. There's something outside of what you know, right? That's a lot of the conversations that you and I had back in 2020 when it seemed like the whole world, right? We had the pandemic, and then we had all the riots in response to George Floyd. We've got the most segregated time. I mean, I lead the most segregated time in America, Sunday morning at 9 and 10:30, right? And that's where I found Miles McPherson, the pastor from the Rock Church, and he wrote a book called The Third Option. And you want to be hungry and hunger to learn what you don't know every single day. The downside of modern education is you get a degree, you get a high school diploma, a degree, you get a job, and then your learning terminates because you thought that success is a destination. Success is the journey, and it's the company that you keep on that journey that brings. So you've got to be hungry to keep learning, keep adjusting, right? And then the third is smart. And smart doesn't mean IQ. It's actually speaking of people smarts, having an intuitive nature of the other person, being aware of who's in the room, being aware of how you say what you say, when you say it, right? So those three words, I think I'd put in play. At the end of the day, leadership, from my mentor, John Maxwell, is influence. Nothing more and nothing less. Leaders influence people to do and to be what otherwise they wouldn't on their own. And the real test of leadership is, as you're leading, look behind you. and see if anybody's following. Because if no one's following, you're just going for a walk. And we got a lot of leaders, and let me just put it in play. We got a lot of pastors who would claim to be leaders. They ain't leading nothing. Because let me tell you, the problem in America has got nothing to do with the White House. It's got nothing to do with Republicans, Democrats, independents. It's got nothing to do with whatever somebody would want to label on Fox News or MSNBC. The problem in America is a long time ago, pastors stopped leading people to trust God to do the impossible. Because if believers and followers of Jesus Christ would step out in everyday, ordinary life and be more Christian than Americans, to be more filled with the Holy Spirit than Republican or Democratic ideology, the change that we'd like to see in America would happen. So the real test of leadership is not because you said it. The real test of leadership is how are people's lives changing and growing.
Yeah. And I love that. So as you're digging deep in this pastor thing, don't get me started on that now. So we're talking about when you say pastor.
I is one, so I can say it.
Yeah. So in that standpoint, when you say they're not leading people to Jesus, what we're wrong in that area? So where did pastors start leading people? Was it so I can give? Let me give you my standpoint before you get started. Sure. I do think we live in a day and age to where our pastors are social media pastors, or are they just for show? And it says they want to be the ones when something's going on, they want to be there and take the picture, and then go back home.
Yeah.
And then go to the next thing, take the picture and be out front. So we got so many showmanship. So people that just want to show and be these people. And then when Sunday comes, they get the camera, they're just all for show. And I think that's where we got it to. Where do you see we went wrong when it comes to pastors?
Some of us, what I said a few minutes ago. Be a lot of people, if some of the things I said makes the edit and you put it out there for the world, there'll be some people who will not like what I said. Yeah. Here's what I don't want another young man or another young woman to minimize their purity. I want them to maximize it. It's leading is worth the risk of being disliked. Now, that's not being mean-spirited or saying things that's hurtful. But if you're speaking truth, and particularly when we're talking about the church and the gospel of Jesus Christ, the gospel in itself is offensive. The gospel is rooted in you're wrong. The message is you're wrong. You're a sinner. You can't fix yourself. You're less than. Now, see, that's not pop psychology today. That's not where everybody wants to show up on a Sunday morning and say, I got myself out of bed, I came down here, and I'm listening. You're going to tell me that I'm wrong? Well, I didn't say that you're wrong. God said that you're wrong. The whole story of Easter, as humans, we're so wrong. The solution was God had to come to the earth, had to be tempted in all ways that we are, yet he doesn't sin, and he goes to the cross. The horrific image of the cross. So we've stopped. We've stopped. Now, I know how some of that happened when you go back in the day, if it's the fire and brimstone type of preaching that somebody had kind of an aversion towards. So they said, well, that might have been too hard, so let's try to lessen it up some. Well, I said this past Sunday, talking about emotions. In our culture today, feelings, your emotions, has been elevated to godship. If you feel it, it must be true, right? And so we've got people saying and doing and feeling all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Because they feel it, it's got to be true. So they've elevated emotions all the way to the top. Well, the church sees those emotions, and the idea is, well, we can't be associated with that craziness, those emotions. So the church swings the pendulum all the way to the other side to say that emotions are just crazy. You got to stuff those emotions. You got to cope with it. You got to control them. You got to conceal them. Because the idea in the church was, if culture's over here, and I think this happened kind of in the 60s, things start kind of getting wild a little bit, unrest, the division of America, right? I mean, it's been 100 years since Abraham Lincoln, but you're still kind of wondering, when are we actually going to have equity in our country? That's bubbling up. You got this Vietnam thing, it's bubbling up. You got this sexual revolution. And so the church saw culture acting. So what the church did is they completely catapulted the pendulum to the other side, as if our goal should be the opposite of culture. Our goal should be God, not the opposite of culture. So here's what we did, Jamie. In the 60s, you go before the 60s, you don't have a lot of quote unquote Christian schools. Now, again, what I'm about to say is controversial. That's fine. I'm for all of our Christians. I'm for everybody. You asked me a question: how did we get to where we are in 2024? Well, you understand, you go back to the 60s, the thing that you know is Christian schools. Now, parochial schools, Catholic schools, which is an all-boys school, they've been around, right? But that idea of that Christian school in the South came in the 60s. Two reasons. One, my lily white girl's not going to school with someone who looks like you. Second, my lily white boy, I don't want him around sex and all these other kind of things. And so we began to create a subculture. We pulled our Christian families out of the public school. We developed things like, are you ready for cray-cray? You want to know why we've all? Church softball leagues. We took the light and the salt, starting in the 60s and the 70s. We took the light and the salt out of the culture. Why should anybody who claims the title of Jesus Christ be surprised at the condition of public schools today? We pulled the light of Jesus Christ out. We pulled the salt, the God flavors out. Then we created church softball leagues and rec leagues and all these other kind of clubs. We created a subculture that basically a family gets plugged into a church. And I'm fine. I'm for everybody. But you were asking the question, how did this happen? We created a subculture where that family doesn't ever have to interact with their neighbors, public school, softball leagues, baseball leagues, because we created a subculture. And when you pull light away from a room, that room has one direction. It's darker. And that's what we've seen in our culture. So then what happened is in the 80s and the 90s, we're kind of losing influence. So the ideology became, well, we just need to become cooler. Kind of get a little more modern, right? Which, what is modern anyways? That's always changing. Yeah. The gospel of Jesus Christ doesn't change, right? The need to lead people to be fully committed following Jesus Christ doesn't change, right? So then the way, seeker sensitive and trying to make it all just how it's warm and fuzzy and everything is nice. And so we come all the way to 2024, where in many ways, a lot of individuals in the country that I live, a lot of families, a lot of young men look at the church, and at best, the thought is irrelevant. Really don't need it. And that's got to change. Because the church is the bride of Christ. So you can be upset with, quote, the church, but the church is just where two or three are gathered in his name. But the church is his bride, and understanding the presence. And when I say church, and listen, I ain't talking about where you sit on Sunday. Quite frankly, where you sit on Sunday is highly overrated. It's who you stand for Monday through Saturday. I think there's great value in gathering together. And as the body of Christ. But I also think there's 167 other hours. And back to the leadership thing, that's why I started a leadership company. Because as a pastor, it's just too easy to get caught under the steeple. And your whole social structure is all church people. Which really, when we leave church, we're not church people, we're doctors and lawyers and plumbers and coaches, teachers and everything else. But there's this kind of persona. And I'll say one more thing that I think the real pressure on pastors today is this. If I were to say America has changed and is continuing to change, and not for the good, would you agree? Is there craziness in our culture? Anybody excited about what's going to go on this fall with the election? Right? I mean, it's, in many ways, the pressure pastors are feeling right now is like the church is like that last little piece of nostalgia that people remember how it was. Right? It ain't how it was when you go to the store. It ain't how it was when you go to school. A lot of places, it isn't how it was. And so we fall in love with this nostalgia. So now a pastor gets excited about kind of teaching how it can be, the gospel of Jesus, and reaching people who today, are far from God. And the pressure that can be put on pastors, right? Like, hey, listen, you work for us. Hey, you know what? If you don't do it like this, we'll go some other church, their music, their kids ministry, their youth pastor. And that, man, we got not just in Ocala, but all across America. You got the revolving church door kind of a thing. And that pressure, brother, is for real.
Yeah.
Right? But that's also why, again, this can feel real controversial. It's also why I wanted to have income stream from someplace other than the church. Because I ain't prostituting myself. I'm not going to do something for a paycheck. And the pressure on a lot of pastors. People know how to vote. They vote when that little plate goes by.
Let me ask you this. All right, so can we go move on? So we talked about.
He said he wants to move on.
No. We're gonna talk about this.
Little too real and true.
No. We had to get some solutions because we talked about.
Come on.
We talked about the problem, and we heard you. What happened before, but now we're now. So what are you stated that the problems that took place back then? What are the answers now? How can everyone listening? How can we work together to collaboratively fix what's have been done?
Absolutely. Number one, everybody who goes to a church, man, if you cheer for an athlete or you cheer for a team, you cheer for an actor or a singer, cheer for your pastor. Cheer for the people who are serving and singing on the worship team, for the people who are in the children's space. Bring that sense of energy into the house, wherever you worship, right? Be that change as you walk in, right? That's how we can make a sense of encouragement in that space. Number two, listen, if you got your kids in a Christian school, there's just as many challenges going on in our Christian school with all the issues of life, all the pressures. And you make that a great school, right? You be engaged, you be involved. You be engaged and involved with your kids when they come home, whatever that homework is, right? You raise up the level of authority of that teacher by saying, hey, listen, I know you might not understand why Mrs., Mr. said this, said that, but listen, right? You lean into that. To those who are still in public school, man, you be engaged, right? You support, you know who your kids' teachers are, who the vice principal is, who is the principal. Man, you pray for them. You come alongside them, lift their arms up, right? If you're in a Little League team, man, you see that as a mission field and you say, listen, we're not just here about winning ball games, but we're here about, I want you to be great men or great young ladies on a softball team or a volleyball team, right? When it comes to our local politicians, you reach out to them, you connect with them, you encourage them, you share your voice, you share your ideas and thoughts. Being present, right, is one of the best first steps. Second is you just embody the change. Just you be that change. When you go to the restaurant and perhaps the meal wasn't as timely as you thought it was going to be, see that moment of uncomfortability as an opportunity for you to pivot from maybe wanting to let somebody know why you're not happy with them, to lean in to encourage. Who knows, that's a single mom who's trying to work 2 or 3 jobs, and encourage them, right? When you're in traffic and someone's maybe a little bit slower and you wish you could get some wherever, man, pause and wonder what's their world about? What's going on in there, right? And you begin to pray for them. When you see somebody acting a certain way that you're like, how could anybody act? Look at that behavior. Immediately lean in and say, okay, there is a backstory to why somebody is acting that way. If you're in a place of leadership, right, then the challenge is to do the right thing regardless. You don't have to survive. To those of us who are followers of Jesus, be kind, be generous, be thoughtful. Pause, and in the pastor world, thank all the dream team, the volunteers who come early and serve and all those kind of things. Do all the right types of caring and listening, teaching, training, advising, mentoring, you serving. But then when it comes time to speak the truth in love. That doesn't mean it's all mushy. It's just truth. And then whatever might happen, believe and trust that God's got you. That God will care for you. So be present, lead, love, lean in rather than leaning back, right? Everything I just said, if you sit and just talk to the television set, nothing's going to change. But if you lean into where your world is, your neighborhood, where you shop, where your kids go to school, the gym that you work out at, where you go to get your car serviced, the restaurants that you service, that service your car, the church that you attend to, you lean in. That's how change begins to happen. I said it to you earlier. Take one step back. There are no such thing as big problems. There's never been a big problem ever in the world. Big problems are small problems that were never dealt with. In 2024, I just listed a lot of big problems. It's the reality of decades where we just kind of didn't deal with it. We covered it, we coped with it, we concealed it. The way that you begin to lean into a big problem is what you're teaching. I'm going to own my greatness, and whatever space that I walk into, I'll be great. Everybody around me might not be great. Everybody else might be showing up less than best. But I can show up. I can be present. I can lean in rather than lean out. You can't do it every place. You find a space or two spaces and lean in. Then when each person begins to lean into that space, then you see what happens. We begin to spread out that change over and over and over.
I was going to say, you pretty much hit the nail on the head when we're talking about how to fix some of these, church issues. Biggest thing, I like how you put that the Bible is offensive. I like to think of it that it's offensive to the flesh. Everything that we do is a war against the flesh. That's ego. We have to shoot that down. The time and error in just in general, where ego is so celebrated. It's all about, what your views are, or how you can sit there and push your opinion up. And then you, like you said, you make it law. When we're in a day and age where that's so rampant, it's hard for a lot of people to humble themselves down to even listen to what the Bible has to say, because it's going to call you out, as it should. And you should, find a sense of peace in that, because if it's tearing you down, the ego side of you, you also know that it's giving you answers as well. It's going to sit there and help you improve upon your life if you put yourself in that spiritual setting of humility to be receptive of that. So we're talking about these problems, standing on the truth, like the Bible says, he's the same as yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So we know because of that, his word doesn't change. So even though times may change, things may be more sexualized now, this and the other, it's on us as individuals and as a collective to own each and every moment. So when we're talking about leadership, a lot of times we like to think of it on the large scale. You standing before people. For most people, the leadership that we're talking about, where it truly matters, is in your day-to-day, your individual choices. Yeah. Spirituality is choice-based. You can either listen to the spirit, or you can grieve it, ignore it, and listen to the flesh. So the more that we cultivate a society of people standing on the truth, regardless of what everyone else is saying, well, this is different now, this is blah, 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 and show those examples, getting married, maintaining a strong home, not sitting there advocating or allowing people to talk about, sex before marriage or producing kids before marriage, all these types of things. Even though we may step on our own toes in doing so, we have to sit there and tell that truth. If not, we give a opening to someone who may be in that moment combating two choices within themselves, saying, well, do I listen to what I feel is in my spirit to do correct, not to go out to that party, as you say, or not to sit there and mac on this young lady, and to do the things that, I'm feeling like I need to take this more serious? In those moments, you give people the energy or the validation to go in one or two camps. And if we think about it in that sense, it'll change the way that we communicate, because we will be more guarded with the words that we use, and also with the type of things that we give our energy to. So to go to what you were talking about with how everything's so different now, we have to take responsibility that we allow that to happen. Every conversation we have where someone is saying something, even if they're making a joke about it, if you don't sit there and check them on it, or hey man, yeah, I used to be doing the same thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, to that person, you just gave them the green light to go ahead and tap into that sin. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about spiritual leadership, we have to own every moment that we ourselves are in various situations, even when we're by ourselves, even allowing yourself to think on those thoughts, or to sit there and feel a certain way towards people and different things. Like, everything we do is giving agreement to something, to positive and negative. And then through that, we get that same energy to other people, to tap into that positive and negative. So, just with spiritual leadership, I think a lot of times we have to really understand the gravity behind what that actually entails, because we have to give an account for what we, basically give someone the green light to go ahead and do or not. And it's a big burden to shoulder. My grandfather was a pastor, and one thing he always say is, it's not a job that like a normal person would just rush into if you understood the gravity of the position. Even in leadership in general, everything that you do is going to impact someone else. So you really have to understand what that is and not just rush into it. And every day, especially if you are in a leadership position, the burden is even more so on you. The weight is even more so. The temptations are even more so, because you have people that's giving you things, giving you power, influence, popularity, everything. So it's even more so on you to sit there and shoot down that ego, that flesh daily. And that's the biggest component I feel is missed. That message being given out to the church and those that have ears to hear. You know, you're going to have to fight that ego. Like, and it's tooth and nail. It's tough.
That's good, Miles.
Yeah, no, that is good. And I was about to ask you, so in your spectrum of what you did with, as a pastor and as a life coach, so you all day you have people coming to you with different type of things. In our world, we see a lack of identity, negative influences. Those are some of the top things that people are, the kids that we work with are struggling with. And maybe just lack of, when we say not having a father, so lack of trying to figure out why this person isn't been in my life. For yourself, what are most people struggling with? What do you see right now? What's coming to your table the most time in today's on both spectrums, the pastor and as a life coach?
Yeah. Well, first, back to Miles' grandfather, that was a really wise statement when he said that, you know, a normal person isn't raising his hand to go in and serve as a pastor. And again, another solution for a lot of people could be, so, you know, when it comes to first responders, we've become a culture to say thank you, right? You see a first responder and you're thankful for them. And a lot of that has been birthed out of PTSD, right? Our military and our first responders, suicide, right? A year ago, we had a rash of people taking their lives in that space. An interesting, sad fact, 90% of pastors who start as a pastor, God tugs their heart. They feel called to pastor, to love, care for, shepherd people. 9 out of 10 will not finish as a pastor. They'll go do something else. At some point, the hurt, the pain, the rejection, the betrayal, the stress, the pressure, cadence, the inability, quote unquote, to please people. So people, and not just, you know, back in the day, it might still be a thing today, I don't know, but back in the day, they called October Pastor Appreciation Month, you know, kind of like Valentine's Day. Linda doesn't want me just to love on her on Valentine's Day. She wants it all year long. One way that people can really make a difference in their pastor's life is encourage them all year long. Recognize what they do. Standing for people every single week, and in some cases, pastors teach Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, right? There's a lot of work there, so they can really encourage. And this goes to your question as well. I think, Jamie, what I see that's even under the identity issue, under the some of the mental wellness issues, the division we see in our culture. I feel in many ways we are fatigued. I think our culture, humans, are just tired. And you know, when you're tired, you're not at your best self. You're not. And there's nothing like having a great nap or a really good night's sleep and you wake up, right? But the fatigue I'm talking about isn't just physical. It's mental, it's spiritual. Partly what both of you guys talked about is you wanted to believe in God, but he feels distance, right? So you don't feel like you're winning in the spiritual space. You don't feel like you're winning in the career space, right? You've gone to school, you got the degree, you thought you would be here. You're single, you thought you'd be married. You're married, you thought your marriage would be better. You thought you would have some kids and being a parent would be different. And there's just this disconnect. And this is real fresh bread for me. Because I think for me, one of the things that robs us of energy is our emotions. And I think for many of us, we have been taught that our emotions aren't good, right? You know, the idea when you're emotional and let's say you were crying and you were a kid, right? And somebody said to you, a parent or caregiver or a coach, stop your crying, or I'll give you something to cry about, right? And I think we spend a lot of time, Jamie, trying to control how we feel. We're convinced we shouldn't feel that way. Angry, sad, disappointed, betrayed. I think we try to cope with it. Okay, I guess this is how it's going to be. Did you see the movie Origins? It's a powerful movie. It's I believe her name was Isabel Wilkerson. She wrote the book called Caste, and she really dove into the racial injustices, and she put forth a thesis that we have created a caste system in America that's even more prevalent and really is at the root of what we would say is racist today. And the point was, this goes back to the, it was Trayvon, right? Down in Orlando, Trayvon Martin, right? And remember when he was killed, and the idea was because of the way he was dressed, that somehow someone felt fearful. And they were having in this movie, and I highly recommend the movie, they were having this conversation, the actress who was playing the role of the writer, her husband, and then her mom. So her mom was the whole generation, right? And it was like she was just overwhelmed when they released the 911 tape. And like the whole impetus behind the moment was somebody was fearful because a black boy was dressed in a certain way. Well, the mom, who would be like her grandma, she said, why couldn't he have just kept his mouth shut and gone along when they approached him? And the writer playing the actress, right, which is from the book, she looked at Mom and said, Mom, what did you say? Why couldn't he just be quiet? Why couldn't he just gone along and moved on his way? And her daughter was like, Mama, why shouldn't he have to? Right? And what dawned on her in that moment was there's a whole generation that basically thought, you know what? You just got to cope with it. The injustice, the racial division, just it's how it's going to be. Figure out how to move your way in and around it, right? And the fatigue and the division that it's brought, because a real emotion was never really felt. And that's the key, Jamie, is emotions, I believe, are given to us by God to be felt, not to be fixed. Even what we're doing at Cut Different, our young men will come to us with a whole lot of emotions. And whatever dream we've got for them to own their greatness, at some point they've got to own those emotions. They feel it. And it's not wrong to feel it, right? We don't need to cope with it. We don't need to try to control it. We don't need to conceal it. From what I'm doing in the marketplace with businesses, what I see in the spiritual space is this fatigueness that when it really comes to trying to deal with the big issues of our day, we're just too tired. We don't have the energy to try to work on a marriage, so we just go to the court and have a divorce. We don't have the energy to really address the issues that we're facing as a culture because we're just tired. And I think one of those reasons is we're not willing to feel that emotion. And then in the spiritual space, what I would say is you feel it, right? You name it. You got to heal it, you got to name it. We've got to get back to a place where we're okay to name it. This is what it is. And back to your humility piece. You know, the only place in the Bible, Miles, where God uses the word success is in Joshua chapter 1. And when God's telling Joshua, you think on, you meditate on his word, and it will bring you great success. God's word is not trying to minimize us. It's trying to maximize us.
Correct.
Yielding to the Spirit doesn't make life less than. It makes it more than. And so when we lean into these spaces and we can be honest and real and we can name it, and you got to have some humility, because you know what happens when you start naming it, then everybody gets defensive and we get personal and we start blaming and this and that. What happens when you no longer, remember the word says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways? You know what's behind that is energy. When you're trying to act a certain way for a front at home, at church, with the buddies, in the club, man, the energy to put on that face compared to just being an authentic you, man, you just got a whole bunch of energy back. So I think it's dealing with the emotions. Even one more thing from that Origins movie, which was probably one of the most powerful ways, probably the most powerful illustration I've ever heard about how in 2024 we can lean in to the racial injustices that we see in our country today. And the illustration was the old house that she was living in. And, you know, we've got parts of our town that's known as the historic district. It's some of the most highly priced real estate in Ocala. And those houses were built a long time ago. But those houses had been renovated, and new owners who weren't there when someone took a shortcut in the 40s, who somebody, instead of really fixing it in the 50s, now when you buy that house on 5th Street, you're the new owner. And what do you have to do? You have to own it in all its flaws. And she talked about how, because we have this thing right in America right now where a lot of people would say, well, I wasn't around during the Civil War. I wasn't here in the 60s when, you know, the Civil Rights Amendment was passed. I mean, I don't have no responsibility. And then what she said was, you've got to own the house that you're living in today. See, that takes a lot of strength. That's humility. Saying, okay, I can be humble. I know who I am. I know I wasn't here that day. I know when that house was built in the 40s, when decisions were made in whatever part of society, culture you want to talk about. I know I wasn't in a place of leadership then. I was in diapers then. But today, I am living in that house. And isn't that what we're doing at Cut Different? Yeah. We're saying to these young men, you own your greatness today. You're responsible for the foundation. You're responsible for the house that you're living in today.
Yeah. It's crazy. So that's what I'm over here moving. We did a podcast. I think we actually did a podcast on leadership, but I spoke to a dad. So everything you said about the pastor, the emotions, you know, that you all feel as pastors, the pain, like just everything that's coming to you. I'm sitting here thinking as a dad. So we're sitting here talking about the way that our society, our culture has been cultivated with, what's been passed down. The young boys that we serve, everything that you just said, we have to be able to show them, because 9 times out of 10, a lot of them don't have fathers at all. So we have to be these stand-up leaders in their lives to do exactly what you just said. But at the same time, similar to what you said as a pastor, as a father, when we've been beaten down, we're taught to be strong. We're taught to, because if you need to, you know, don't cry or else, you know, at a young age in life. So now we grow up and we teach our kids these same things we never learned from when we were broken or when we were younger.
Yep.
So now we're teaching these things to these kids. But again, now I go back to, you know, as men, most men, if mentally, they're not sane, so to speak. If they're not mentally there, they're teaching these same bad traits. So you're building a broken young man, so to speak. So I sit and I'm just sitting there, I'm grabbed, because it's crazy to be able to see the side of, you know, from a pastor's standpoint, you know, even as a father, but the young men of society that doesn't get to get that strong man that's been able to be built up and shown these things and being healed over the years and being shown that your emotions do matter and you should be able to feel how you feel, and be heard. I think a lot of times that's why within our society, we see men backing out of the relationships. We see men backing out of the kids' lives because they don't know how to.
No.
So it's just crazy to hear, just the pictures that you're painting, and we actually see this. So I just thought that was just, it's something worth putting out there for everyone to understand, because there are fathers that we have, and not just fathers, but, parents, but you have fathers that hear this, that, they need to understand that they do need to go see somebody. They do need that mental health aspect. They need to go, talk to somebody about how they truly feel. In order, if we want to see, I guess, in the parental aspect of it, if we want to see our kids do better, if we want to see the schools do better, then we have to get help first as men, owning whatever it was that we lacked or didn't have back in the day. So
100%. And I have failed, and I'm just learning this at 58. I'm hardwired as a fixer. And in life, as men, we're rewarded for being fixers, right? But emotions aren't intended to be fixed. They're intended to be felt. So even as a dad, right, I was always aware to let my daughters feel, right? But the mistake I made is I never let them see how I felt. And because I was trying to control my emotions, conceal, cope with. And even this last Ironman race, everybody, is complimentary about doing an Ironman, but man, inside, I was an emotional wreck. Things had not gone good up towards the race. Travel situations, some health issues. Then we're flying to California, and you're taking your bikes with you. I mean, a lot of opportunity for problems. The problems culminated on I-4. If you're familiar with California, I-4 is that main highway in California driving. It's crazy, right? And I had just picked up my rental and actually upgraded and had my daughter with me because we were racing together, right? And kind of felt a little prideful about myself, right? Because we had rented a Pacifica, but I upgraded to a SUV. I mean, the steering wheel was heated. I mean, this was a monster. This was a boat on wheels. And we're on I-4 headed to the venue. And I kind of heard something that wasn't best, like a different sound, but it's a new vehicle, so I didn't know what it was. And the guy, and I'm in the left-hand lane, getting after it. A guy here, and he starts to point, and then I heard it, and the right wheel exploded, and I'm right on the rim. And I had already had all these other emotional things, and now this happened. And so I got over to the left-hand berm, so the southbound's coming this way, all the northbound, and I'm just stuck. And I tried calling the rental car company, and I got somebody in Taiwan somewhere, nowhere, and my daughter's there, my wife's there, and I don't know how to get the tire out. The race is in a day and a half. We're supposed to be at the Airbnb and getting things set up. I got to go get signed in. We needed to get in the water, test the water, a lot of things, right? And I'm working really hard to conceal everything. I'm not the most mechanical, changing the tire. And I didn't even know this, but like in the big fancy SUVs, in the like fob, the thing that you push, there's a key that's hidden. I didn't know that you have to take off part of the bumper and lower the tire. And so out of nowhere, a guy comes and helps us. We get to the Airbnb, right? And so we got a couple sandwiches, and I'm working on the bikes, and I went out on this little balcony. And my daughter was there, and Linda's there, and I'm here, right? And when I say I'm an emotional wreck, I shrunk to the size of an ant. I was ashamed. I was frazzled. Health, everything, embarrassed. I had these voices in my mind telling me, oh, so the Pacifica wasn't good enough for you, huh? Sees what happened when you don't trust God. Now, that's not from God. Oh, you can get out there and change the tire. I thought you're a Marine. I mean, just all kinds of negativity. And Eddie, my daughter, Katie, she goes into the Airbnb, and man, I just lost it. And I looked at Linda. She was sitting across kind of where, and Jamie is. And I said to her, don't let her see me like this. Please, don't let her see me like this. As if I was doing something wrong. I had just been through a real traumatic situation. The tire blew on I-4. I didn't know how we would get it fixed. Physically, I had some issues. We hadn't signed in for the race yet. But something inside of me, don't you show those emotions. And so I'm learning what you just talked about, that it's not a sign of weakness. Emotions are meant to be felt, not fixed. Emotions, and one of the reasons, Eddie, we're afraid is because we're afraid if we feel it, we will become it. And that's not true. If we feel it, it will direct us. And so we do everything to push it away. And what I'm learning first, God is emotional. Jesus wept. Jesus looked on Jerusalem, and he was moved with compassion because he saw people who were like sheep without a shepherd. In the garden, he knelt and he prayed, could this cup, the anguish of the crucifixion on the cross, the pain and the sorrow and the suffering, in the Old Testament, called him a man of sorrows. See, the emotions are intended. The emotions are meant to connect us to God, ourselves, and one another. And the reason we're not connected to God, and we're not connected to ourselves and to other people, is because this thing that we share, what makes us human from all the other creation, what makes us human is we have emotions. We feel. And we've been stuffing, hiding, concealing, coping, controlling. And I think it's one of the things that has divided us. And the more that we're willing to open up and be emotional, a guy on our team, Joshua, I didn't know the term, but I guess there's a term called bro code. And I guess it's a thing, right? He said, you understand you're violating the bro code. When you talking about them emotions, you violate the bro code. So maybe I just violated the bro code here in the Cut Different podcast.
You good, we good.
But it goes back to what you said, Jamie, is it can't be about just spouting off about what's wrong. It's got to be about leaning in to make it right and being honest, being truthful, feeling, connecting, letting the Spirit of God guide us. Those are steps in the right direction.
Oh, I love the transparency. I love the thought of feelings are meant to be felt, and that's truly deep. And I think what this podcast is gonna do, just that message alone, feelings are meant to be felt, and that's on both ends, from a female to a male.
Absolutely.
You know, a lot of us are trying to just mesh our feelings down, which causes a whole bunch of other problems as well. So I love that message, man. But man, we're going to have to wrap this thing up, man. So right now, what I need you all to do, before you do anything right now, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, all right? Like, subscribe, comment. It's free. Smash that button. It won't cost you a thing, I promise you. But PMC, man, you blessed the stage today. We really, truly appreciate you for having you through. The wisdom that you dropped today, I'm pretty sure it's going to help somebody. It's going to help a lot of people that watch it. And you don't got a lot of stuff on YouTube outside of hope things. So I'm glad that we can have a platform for you to be able to come on to, and we appreciate you for coming for sure. Cool. All right, so fellas, you got anything for PMC before we get up out of here?
I appreciate it. I learned a lot. Well, I appreciate it.
Cool.
Appreciate it. Just keep advocating for people to stand on truth.
Come on.
I love it. And PMC, so one thing I'm going to have you do. So this is your camera right here, all right? So, you know, you can say anything. You can lead people to wherever you want to lead people. But one thing I want you to do for me as you close out. We talked about the people that are, you know, feeling your feelings. And we also talked about people that are just lost. People that are they're searching for something. So if you could just give a message to those people that may be looking for something, need a little inspiration to lead us out. And then you also can tell people where they can find you as well. Close out.
Cool. There are a lot of sources for hope, but I know this to be true. The greatest source of hope in the world is in a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. You can live a few days without food, a little bit without water, a few minutes without air. But a human being can't live 1 second without hope. Because the moment hope is gone from you, you're gone. Hope is that deep ability that although the world around you might be going completely crazy, there is a steadiness and a peace within you. And that hope has a name, and his name is Jesus Christ. I'm not asking you to join a church. I'm not asking you to clean up your life. I'm asking you today to believe that Jesus Christ loves you. He's not mad at you. On the contrary, he's madly in love with you. Would you trust, would you believe in him today? And before you believe in him, let me say this. You've got to expose the lie. Because in the word believe, B-E-L-I-E-V-E, is a lie. The lie that somehow, perhaps, potentially, Jesus can't make a difference. The lie that somehow you've done something so bad that God could never forgive it. And the lie that somehow following Jesus is going to stifle fun in life. When you follow Jesus, the originator of life, when you follow Jesus, the only world leader that died and came back from the dead, when you follow Jesus Christ, you change and everything around you changes. So all you got to do is say, hey, God, save me today. I've sinned, can't fix it, but I trust Jesus. He died on the cross for me. Because he came back from the dead, I can come back from anything. And listen, if you've prayed today to begin following Jesus Christ, you can connect with me. I'm on pretty much everything social, Mark D. Cummins. You can email me personally, mark@hopeinocala.com. You can check out the YouTube page at Hope in Ocala. You can see my webpage, Mark, M-A-R-K, middle initial D, last name Cummins, C-U-M-M-I-N-S. And together, you and I will continue to travel on this thing we call life. Sometimes it's dusty, sometimes it's clear sky. But the truth is, traveling together will give us strength that when the temptation is to throw in the towel, when the temptation is to be less than your greatness, together we'll be great. Not just for our own causes, but for those around us and for the God who saved us, Jesus Christ. Peace.
Man, I can tell you did that a time or two before. Hey, try Jesus, don't try me. All right, peace. See y'all next time.